This is Roll Call for this edition of African Drums. The African drums are sounding.
Good evening and welcome to this evening's edition of African Drums, which is, as you know, the television arm of the Cuffy 250 committee. This evening we have with us a very unique panel of Cuffy 250 members, and we will be looking at the question of and discussing and sharing issues on something that is of critical importance, something that Courtney Crumewing died for, and something that it was of sufficient significance that somebody thought it important to commit murder for. The question is, and the comments will be about, why vote? Now, the panel this evening consists of Comica Johnson, Ms. Eve Blackman, Walter, George, and Joan Cambridge, all members of the Cuffy 250. And what we hope to do is just to share our views on why vote. Let me start right away with from Comica's starting from the left, coming to the right. Why vote, Comica? From, in your opinion, share with us why it is important to vote.
Well, voting in my mind, Doc, many of us don't know that the simple act of voting affects each aspect of our lives. It affects where we get our education, the quality of education we receive, the type of jobs we have, our status in society. It even affects, you know, it might sound silly, but it even affects the type of spouse we get married to, because voting determines the kind of government you get, and the type of government you get, the type of policies that govern your country, the type of atmosphere, the type of policies that the country has to, you're subjected to, determines your everyday life. It affects you either positively or negatively. So in my mind, voting affects each aspect of your life.
Okay. All right, thank you. Let's move on, Ms. Blackman.
Too many of us in Guyana are experiencing the Cinderella syndrome. For those not familiar with the story of Cinderella, you need to know that she was growing up in a house with her stepmother who was evil. Evil because, being in charge of the house, she did not dispense favors equally. She treated her two daughters differently and better. And even though Cinderella was also the daughter of her late husband, Cinderella was dressed in rags, whereas they were dressed in the best of clothes. They had the best of everything. Cinderella was often hungry, had to do all the work and cater to the rest of the family. But Cinderella is a fairy tale that has a happy ending because she found her Prince Charming. Our lives, many of our lives here in Guyana are like Cinderella's, but there's no Prince Charming. We have to put an end to this. And the way to do it is through the ballot. We have to vote to change so that our lives, more of our lives could be better.
Okay, all right, thank you, George.
As a member of Cuffy 250, voting is simply for me a way of speaking your mind and letting your voice be heard. And voting is one way of honoring your history, and voting also is about speaking for your children, born and the ones yet to come. And another simple way what voting means to us is about giving you credibility and legitimacy, and that for me in simple sense how I would tell the viewing audience why you must vote.
Okay, thanks. Joan.
Doc, for me the answer to that question is a question that everybody has to ask himself or herself. Do you accept the life that you're leading now? Is it okay with you? Is your quality of life acceptable to you? If it's not acceptable to you, you've got to get up and go out and take steps to change it. Because there's no way it will change if you don't go to vote. If you're happy, well then nobody can urge you to go to vote. Not even Coffee 250. You know, anybody, any politician, no one. If you're happy with your state of life. If you're not, you owe it to yourself and your children to get up on May 11 and go vote. That's the answer to that question, I think.
Okay, let's explore that a little bit. To me, voting is the greatest form. It's the greatest form of self-respect. It's the greatest way of expressing respect for self. By that I mean, it is saying, my voice counts. If I don't vote, it means I'm saying I don't count, I am insignificant. So it's a great form of self-respect. And to follow up on what George said a little bit, voting also represents a continuity of a struggle. Voting is not something that it just happened automatically. It's not something that was given. It's not a right that was just passed on because your heart beat. It is something that ancestors had to fight for. It is something that people died for. It's something that Courtney Crumb-Ewing just died for. So I think we need to recognize that there is a responsibility that borders on self-respect and respect for others in the community to, in fact, exercise that right to vote. Comica.
I would like to add also, from a historical perspective, our foreparents died for the right for us to vote. Many of them struggled for many years. They lost loved ones, they lost husbands, they lost wives, children, just for the right to cast that, put that X on that ballot. Voting determines the government we get. Voting determines the policies that they voted for the government whose policies would reflect their interests. That's what they struggled for. That's what our foreparents laid down their lives for. And as young African Guyanese today, we have to respect that fact. We have to be able to recognize it and not be too complacent, not be carefree, but respect it enough to go out on May 11th and cast that vote.
Blackman, you want to add to that?
I'd like to add to what Joan said. If you're happy, then you don't need to change. Nothing needs to change for you. But for the people who are 25 and under, this existence in this environment that we are living in right now is all they know. They may think they're happy, but they need to think about a change because they do not know that things have been and could be better than what we're experiencing right now. So I would like to urge anyone who thinks that they're happy to really look
At the meaning
look
of their
around
happiness.
and believe that and try and make a change, because you could be better, much better. Those of us who've been around a long time know that.
Yep.
Those of us who've moved around in other parts of the world know that. Your lives could be better. You need to think about a change.
Ms. Cambridge, you want to add something to that? You're bursting.
Yeah, I'm bursting because that's a very important point that Eve made. Is that, you know, compared to what, you know, what's really the meaning of happiness? What's the quality of life? You know, what do you aspire to? You know, do you have dreams? What are your dreams? You know, what will make your dreams come true? Do you have the environment right now that will help you to make your dreams come true? So, you know, you just can't just sit on your butt. You got to get out there and go and make your dreams come true. Vote for people who will encourage you to make your dreams come true. But I don't know if I can say this now, because what I want to say tonight is I'm reaching out to the women in the society, especially women. I came here tonight knowing that we are asking everybody to come out to vote. And it's hanging on the fact that this week the Rastafarian community is celebrating the birth anniversary of Empress Menen, who is the wife of Emperor Haile Selassie. And, you know, we have a statement from Cuffy 250, and the reaching out to voters will hang directly on this statement. So if I may, Dr. Ng-A-Qui, may I read the statement for the Ng-A-Qui community, I mean the Rastafarian community. It's a statement of solidarity on the celebration of the birth anniversary of Queen Menen. Well, this is it. It's short, and I'll read it, and then I'll read the poem that is dedicated to Queen Menen and is urging Guyanese women to come out and vote after that. And I can read that at a later time after some folks have a chance to, you know, express what they have to say. The Empress Menen, last queen of queens of Judah, was wife of Emperor Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia. She was a committed humanitarian who served the underprivileged by opening up education to girls. She built orphanages and hospitals and gave freely from her own funds to support monasteries and churches. A renowned and accomplished woman known as the mother of the Ethiopian nation, Empress Menen would also manage to spin cotton, cook the national dishes, manage a business, raise children, meet with foreign emissaries, host international dignitaries, as a matter of course in her daily life. This message comes from the Cuffy 250 Committee in solidarity with the Rastafarian community here in Guyana and throughout global Africa, on the occasion of their celebration on Friday, April 3rd, of the birth anniversary of this phenomenal Rastafari woman. A woman for all seasons. Empress Menen was born April 3, 1891. This poem is dedicated to the spirit and memory of the Empress Menen by the poet Gwendolyn Brooks, to black women. Can I leave it for the end?
No,
Read it
go
now?
ahead, read it now. Don't break the continuity. You know.
Okay.
Keep it
To
full.
black women, sisters, where there is cold silence, no hallelujahs, no hurrahs at all, no handshakes, no neon red or blue, no smiling faces, prevail. Prevail across the editors of the world who are obsessed, self-honeying, and self-crowned in the seduced area. It has been a hard trudge, with fainting, bandaging, and death. There have been startling confrontations. There have been tramplings of monarchs and of other men. But there remain large countries in your eyes. The shrewd sun, the civil balance, the listening secrets. And this is the line that is important to us now. And you create and train your flowers still. This is by Gwendolyn Brooks, an African-American poet. This is brought to you here tonight in memory of the spirit of Empress Menen, and to say to you that in training your flowers, creating your flowers, those are your children, you have got to think of a future for them. And a future for them, to my mind, means a change. I wouldn't tell you who to go out to vote for. I don't think Cuffy 250 is doing that. But I know I am going to vote for the AFCP, ACNU AFC. I know that's me. And I'm not telling anybody who to vote for. But it seems to me that that coalition means that finally Guyana will come to the stage where we can get things going without all the little bitty nonsense about race and blocks in our way and all, and that sort of stuff. So that's it. In the name of Empress Menen.
Okay, thank you, Joan. Comica, you wanted to follow up on that?
I would just like to say, each morning that I travel to work, I often look out the window to the faces of young people, especially that are commuting on their way too, and I tend to see a lot of sad faces, a lot of sad, long faces, and in my mind that speaks to a larger picture of what is happening in society. Are you comfortable with with the policies that are in place? Are you comfortable with the state of society as it is? If you're not, if you are, then I wouldn't encourage you to vote. But if it makes you uncomfortable, then I urge you to go out and vote.
George, could you follow up on a little bit of what Ms. Blackman said about the question of the future and also the issue of the Cinderella syndrome?
Well, let me deal with the future aspect first, because the future aspect tie into what I call the trinity of time, which is basically past, present, and future. And I want to echo the trinity of time because generally persons got a phobia with history, and basically, and something which we sometimes overlook, that the past is the only complete aspect of time we have, which everybody use as a measuring stick to determine how we operate in the present and how we influence the future. So I want to emphasize the aspect of voting is historic for us, and we need to not just look at it as historic, but look back in the complete aspect of time, because really and truly and honestly speaking, the future do not exist. It might be mind-blowing for some persons, but it do not exist. The most we could do today, present moment, is our actions would only influence the future. Because there's nothing in the future that I could pinpoint and accurately say X is going to happen tomorrow. So in essence, the most I could do is influence tomorrow. And there's where voting comes into play. Voting deals with the future. The Cinderella syndrome, I wouldn't comment on that now, but I'm going to allow somebody else in the panel to deal with the Cinderella syndrome.
Okay. Joan, you want to?
Yeah, I like what Walter is saying about the future, because you know, in our Coffee 250 education programs, we have our plan. I think we've already started that. Is to get children to vision themselves in their own future. But this is not just an exercise for children. It's also an exercise for adults. You know, because you're sitting in your present and you're seeing what you want your future to be like, you know. And if I may give you the whole example, the metaphor, there was a time when we cleaned up Coffee 250, the monument. I remember all the people who were there, you know, Cathy Hughes was there, Nigel Hughes, a whole lot of people. And, you know, Philip Moore was still alive. And, you know, as we saw that, the dirt, you know, roll off of the Coffee 250 monument, you know, it was like a cleansing of all of us. We were really happy. You know, it was like an awakening for us. And we started to do some classes in the environs of Coffee. And the little children came every afternoon. And I remember preparing some modules for teaching to think, teaching the children to think. And we would ask the children, what do you want to be when you grow up? And one little boy, I'll always remember this little boy. I don't know where he is now, but he came forward and he said, Miss, I want to be a doctor. So I said, so you want to be a doctor? Do you look at ER, that's emergency room on television? He says, yes, miss. I said, when is ER on next time? He said, tonight, miss, tonight. I said, well, when ER comes on, what you must do is place yourself in that operation room, and you're that doctor doing the operation. For that whole hour, is it an hour the show is? He says, yes. For that whole hour, you just use your imagination. You be that doctor. When you stretch your hand out for the instrument, the nurse places in there, you're the one who will make the incision in the patient. You're conducting that operation. And at the end of that hour, you know what you must do? He said, what miss, because now he's very anxious. I said, you find out exactly what you have to do to get there in your future. You know, place yourself in your future. And this is what, you know, you can apply that to the voting idea. You know, see yourself now and see where you want to be in your future and decide which government is going to get you there. Okay. Certainly not this one.
Okay, let me follow through on that. It's a point that Ms. Blackman brought up, and that is, what do you say and how do you get the people who, particularly the young people, who really have, they are a voting age, but their only experience of life is what happened in Guyana within the last 22 years. How do you relate, Walter, this is back to you too, how do you relate the past, the present and the future, when the past is really a very limited, a very poor example of what a vision of the future, and actually controls what their vision of the future is. It's like having no past, and let me tell you where else I'm coming with this, and trying to create a future. I spoke with a gentleman last Sunday, and he was trying to convince me that any time before 1638 is not important. All right. And furthermore, as a matter of fact, any time before 1954 was not important. Okay, this is when the political movements started and Guyana started to move towards independence and so forth. And I listened to this gentleman, and the question arose again: how do you relate to the future when your concept of the past is limited and only contains oppression? It contains waking up every morning with reading the paper that some black person is killing some black person. It only has the negative component. There is no positive component. All right. So there is a part of the past that is required. Knowledge is required in order to really vision the future.
Yeah.
So could you all address that? How do you address when we're looking now at the difference between the young voter and the old voter? The young voter, the old voter, you can say, yes, we had better times. We knew education when education was education.
Yeah.
Right? We knew when culture was culture. We knew when we were proud to be Guyanese. Right? It meant something in the world when you said you came from Guyana. Right? Now, the young people who are 20 and under, 22 and under, have no concept of that, because when they go out in the world, it's not the same reception. What they are exposed to is totally different from what we were exposed to. So address the difference between the young voter, what you would tell the young voter, as opposed to what you would remind the older voter about.
In cases like that, like we said, we're looking at a youngster who is not that, let me put it that, educated. He's not that so much literate.
No. Let me not talking literate. I'm talking about just his experience. Because of his youth. It's no fault of education. It's just that he's young. He has not had the exposure of a better life. Right. All he knows is what
he's seeing currently and so on.
Right.
Well, again, based on my socialization, is that despite a person may not expose to certain we would call moral situation, positive situation within the inner self, there is some sort of standard to judge right and wrong despite you're not exposed to it. And for me, this now talk about an institution, because within the self there is an institution exists. And what I would ask a youngster and a young person is, what is your view of an institution? Because one of the things I would point out to that person is that for us to sustain life, you have to have proper institution. And so one of the things I would ask a youngster, what you would constitute as a proper institution. And generally, for most person who talking about proper institution would talk about, you know, a good security system, a good financial system, a good religious and a good spiritual system, and good relationship, which equal to good marriage too, right? So these are some of the things I would bring to them. I'd raise it through an institution. I would use the concept of institution, because good institution sustain life. So that person now would be able to measure based on having the inner self, the knowledge of the inner self. He would be able now to measure where he want to go in terms of a proper institution, and weighing it with respect to the current institutions we have now. And he now could use that simple information and influence his future by, again, using the power of the vote. That's how I would deal with that question.
Okay. Ms. Blackman, you want to comment on that?
Well, what is sad in the current environment, we know that the government, most of us know that the government creates an environment in which we all live. Some would argue that what has taken place in the last 20 or so years has been an absolute absence of government. Some of us know that even with less money, people understood the concept of service, and that's what inspired them to be in the government, to be part of the government. Some would say this is a dog-eat-dog environment that these children have, the young people have come up in. They're not familiar with old courtesies. There's a lot of crudeness that they've been exposed to, a lot of rudeness, and a lack of the culture that we have embraced over since independence, actually, I would say. The way the behavior of the police, who can behave that way because of a lack of accountability, and not crimes, so many unsolved crimes. This is the environment that was created for the people who are 25 to 35 years old. Back in the day, we didn't have the money. The government that we grew up under didn't have the types of money, the type of computers and what goes with the computers, internet and that type of thing. Those were non-existent things, but yet we dare say, many of us dare say, that the quality of life was definitely better.
I was 7 years old when this present government came into power. I would deal with this question in a common sense way. Common sense would tell you, when you listen to what your elders tell you about life before this present government, when you look at your experiences under this present government, the things that you're exposed to, the lack of accountability, the lack of security, the amount of corruption, it just common sense tells me that there must be something better than this. When you look at television, I tend to look at these Western shows a lot, or you look at the Western news and you see how they govern, how they function in a democratic society, and you look internally to what you have in Guyana, something must be amiss. It's like night and day in my mind. So I would look at that question from a common sense point of view, by listening to what what elders tell you about what happened before you were born, what I have experienced, and what I see happening in other countries. I know that there must be a better future than this, and the only way to change the situation that we are in right now is by the vote.
Well, thank you, Comica. Do you want to follow up on that, Joan?
Yeah, I would say, Doc, that's a hard one. It's a hard question. Because I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. Is a long time ago, Ken Moore, who's a photographer, came to take a picture of me in my environment for the back of my book. And all weekend he shot uphill and downhill in the waterfalls in the farm all about. And when he came up and he sat, relaxing on the veranda, and I'm looking out towards the forest, the rainforest, I said, Ken, would you believe that there are mountains back there? He said, you, in your writer's imagination, you crazy. I ain't shoot one mountain all weekend I've been here. I said, Ken, there are mountains back there. He said, you crazy, where are they? I didn't shoot any mountains. So I went and brought pictures, excuse me, and showed him. He was struck. He said, man, mountains. He said, man, this is amazing. I said, that is a metaphor for ignorance. the mist over the mountains. The mist hadn't lifted all weekend. So he had no idea that that was going on. Now, how do you get? You have to have the institutions that would get to the minds of these young people and nurture the minds, tell the minds. But first, you have to have elders they can believe in and trust. And they have to tell them what happened back there. They have to clear that mist from over the mountain. For example, there is something going abroad right now about Forbes Burnham, you know, like he's a monster and stuff like that. The kids nowadays are saying that they're hearing, young people are saying, they're hearing in Burnham times you couldn't get flour, in Burnham times you couldn't get this and so on. And it's so stupid because all you have to tell them is think now. You know, this is the idea. We're teaching children to think and we're teaching adults to think too. Because if they think, they will go out and vote. You know, if they think, if they're thinking. But if they just want to sit, you know, but I'm not here to harangue them, okay? You know. I'm just saying that you tell these young people, look, there was that man that is being, you know, demonized out there. He had a vision that he would feed, house, and clothe the nation by 1976. And we were working towards that. Do you see anything to compare with that in these times, with a vision for Guyana? And that would have been a vision. Now, can you imagine if we had got through with that? Well, there are a whole sort of things, all sorts of things happening in that period. You know, there was the Walter Rodney debacle, and you know, if it wasn't Walter Rodney, it would have been Burnham. Somebody had to be dead with all those ammunition stored up all over the place and so on. You know, and it was Walter Rodney who died, and this is going on and on ad nauseum. You have to give the children some kind of focus. You know, you have to teach them. It's education that will take care of that question you've asked. Because that mist over the mountain is serious. They just don't know. And they're all and some of them is not just very young people. You know, they're grown-ups. You know, normally they have children. You know, some of them are getting grandchildren because they start early these days. And they don't know about those days. You have to have people that they can trust and they can believe, and we have got to begin to teach them how to think and how to, you know, as Comica says, you know, reason, you know, and say there must be something wrong here, you know. That's I think, would be my response to that.
Ms. Blackman, you want to add to that?
Well, let's look at the demonization of Mr. Burnham, who has been seen as a human being, a man of humanity, a leader who brought free education from nursery to university, which nobody today knows about. The amount of money that parents have to spend today to educate their children in public schools, and then the children still do not end up with a proper education in many cases. Those are things that were absent from this man that's being demonized. Joan, you'll have to help me. I think NIS, he started the NIS program.
Yeah. I worked for design and graphics like that. There was NIS.
The NIS program.
Yes. There was Guyana.
These are humane systems that he has put in place that are helping us still today.
Yeah.
The NIS was able to supply the funds to build a bridge over the Berbice River. The systems that he put in place were humane. He didn't.
What happened to the bridge?
There were things. There were things. You know, for the young children who didn't do well in school, there was a system to guide them. What was the name of that program? That was promptly closed down because money had to be made for other things. What was it? Nobody even knows the program now.
Yeah, and I'm getting a little old, so these things don't stay too well.
Where they trained young people who didn't do well in the traditional schools.
In the multilateral system.
The multilateral schools, but beyond the multilateral schools, it was a paramilitary
Oh, the national service.
National service.
The national service. You don't remember national
which
service.
took the place, which was able to prepare
Exactly.
youths to have a more positive future.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
There was no stark nothing. If you didn't do well in school, you had no place to go. All you can look at possibly lead you into crime or things like that. So this man who's been demonized had all those systems in place that have been torn down.
Somebody said something recently that the young people in the streets right now would have had all that energy would have been, flowing into national service. If you know,
well,
the idle young people.
what we see missing is the vision. And the lack of a vision means if the adults don't have the vision, they can't really pass on the concept of a vision that is national to the young people, right? And when I say a national vision, I'm thinking of the way religious education, religion was handled during the Burnham eras, when there was only Christianity. You only had Christian holidays, right? You only had Christmas and Easter and so forth. And his government is the one that in fact made national holidays for the other religions, including the Hindu religions, the Muslim religions, and so with a concept of a national vision. Now we tend to forget that. We tend to think that Hindu holidays just came about. They were a gift of the British. They were not. They were a gift of the Burnham government, not as a gift, but as a part of the vision for national, the nation of Guyana, which is 6 races. One destiny, one people. Right? Now, coming back to one of the things here that everybody talked about, and the concept of vision, and young people lacking a vision. And Comica, you talked about different ways you would see the common sense approach leads you to come to your decision. But what about the older folks now, who are just sitting, not wanting to participate? Is there anything that you can tell them or suggest to them, or would you just leave them alone sitting?
I'd leave them alone.
You would leave them alone sitting?
Yes. It's too much energy to deal with people who are that they're lost. You've got to deal with the children.
The young
I
people.
give you an example of what I'm talking about?
Sure. So that you cover both ends of the spectrum here. Huh?
The children, leave those people alone. Leave those people who are not part. You've got to get to the minds of the children. For example, and this is my favorite subject. The rainforest is being shared out in parcels. It's parceled out, okay? And it's going into individual pockets. Now that is national patrimony. That's a legacy of the children. We have got to get those children involved in standing out front and saying, I have a little scenario where the children are saying, Bazadi Dolly, the Guyana rainforest bag lady. I like to call myself AKA until I get somebody to play the part. So Bazadi Dolly is there conducting our orchestra and telling the children, repeat after me. Is a leaf, they say is a leaf. She says is a tree, is a silviculture spree, and they repeat after her. And then they say, I got a notion that a portion belongs to me. And then she says, after it goes on, I'm cutting everything to make it short. And then in the end, when she sensitizes them so much, they just break into a dead run screaming, thief, thief, thief. Now these are children, expressing themselves, saying they're stealing our stuff from us. You've got to stop.
Okay,
so you got to, get the children and leave those older people to sit.
Alone. Okay, let me tell you why I asked the question to say about the older people. Because again, I was speaking to an older gentleman, and he was telling me about they conducted an experiment. When it comes to your question, Joan, about thief. Not everybody considers what's happening thief because of the culture, but let me give you what I was told. He said to me, there was an experiment that was conducted and they had orange people, and they had green people, and red people, and blue people. Just using the symbols. And they gave them a bunch of things to give out. And guess what? The natural process. The orange gave to the orange people, the purple gave to the purple people, the blue gave to the blue people. So he was convincing me, based on what you were saying, he was convincing me that it was a natural process to give for the orange people, to give to the orange, the green to give to the green, the black to the black.
That's why you vote to
Well, wait. And so the question that came to my mind was, when you have good governance, isn't the whole reason to be, isn't the whole reason for good governments to exist? Isn't the reason to control and to manage and to distribute equitably with economic justice in mind as opposed to social justice, the resources of the nation for the benefit of the people?
For everybody.
For everybody. So it has nothing to do with, I mean, it's not a cake shop. If I had a cake shop, I could give you, and I could give you, and I could give you, and not give you. But if I have the national resources, I don't have
There must be
that
equity.
option.
Yeah.
That option does not exist. So when you say thief, the point I'm making is that some people don't have that concept of thief, based on what this gentleman was telling me. Some people think that is most natural, like corruption. Some people have no concept of corruption. To them, it's just
So
the
if you're in power, you
No,
give to your own.
Because it's
that
the
is-
norm.
Well, that is, and this is coming back to
encoded in our DNA.
Yes.
So we don't recognize
this.
it anymore.
This is what I'm coming back to in terms
Yes.
of the 20-year, the culture.
Yes.
When we grew up, that did not exist. That interpretation did not exist.
But how quickly
Well,
the new
but the
interpretation
point
has
is-
become a culture
the
of
point is
acceptance
the-
with everybody.
The point is, that interpretation is not from a young person.
Okay.
That interpretation is from an older person. So the point I'm making is that older folks also have serious issues,
We should
and
lock them up.
and have changes and have changed over time
Keep them away from the children.
to accommodate the situation, right? So the voting to vote, I mean, it seems logical and reasonable, and we must go out and vote for all kinds of reasons as discussed here.
Yes.
All right, all kinds of reasons. But again, Courtney Krung-Yuen died because he was carrying a bullhorn, encouraging people to vote. Somebody shot him, somebody murdered him because he was saying vote. Yeah. That, to me, alone is a powerful statement to remind everybody of everything that we've talked about here tonight.
You should go out and vote for
No.
Courtney Krung-Yuen.
Now, so let us do. We have about 3 minutes, 4 minutes. Let us take a minute each and wrap up. As a word of encouragement now to the young folks, particularly. Don't worry with the old people. The old people have other
Young
issues.
women, I'm dealing with the women.
But
I'm
however
working.
you want to wrap up, let us take one minute each and wrap up with a word on, in summary, why vote. Starting with you, Comica, and then we'll work around.
We must vote because this right did not come easy. It came on the backs of men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice for us to have this right. We must vote because it affects how we live, how we exist as a society, how our children are educated, how we're educated, you know, how the type of jobs we get, the type of lifestyle we have, our statuses in society. We must vote because what is happening here in this country at this present time is not democracy. We must vote because we are uncomfortable with how things are going in this country, and we're frustrated. So in my mind as a young person, if you don't like what is happening, don't sit and say I don't care, I'm not taking part, and let somebody stay home and let somebody else determine how your future will be run. So please go out and vote.
Okay, Ms. Blackman.
I think the old people will vote. We don't need to tell them whether to vote or not. I think they will vote.
Yes.
And the young people, I would just like to reinforce that what you know is not all there is. It could be better, and you need to consider making a change.
Okay.
Well, in wrapping up, I would put it in two ways. First, dealing with the issue for the old people who don't want to be part of the voting process, and it also would go for the youth. Not voting does not equal neutral, because in the modern context of today's society, there is no neutral person. So if you do not vote, in the future, Guyana will still be run by a government. That is one you must understand. So, two, I like to tie voting back with the institution. Because why? Because with an institution, it sustains life. It gives civilization to your country. And everybody wants to be part of something, some institution, wherever you name it. You can name it. There are various institutions we could talk about. And to have that institution, it means you got to get good health. Because good health helps sustain lives. It comes back again. The institution of health sustains the institution of your society. And so voting, again, will help impinge on sustaining good institution, which means sustaining civilization, which everybody can survive and live. In essence, is like securing immortality, symbolically speaking.
Okay, thank you, George. John?
As I said earlier, that I'm speaking especially to the women. You're the generation bearers. You're the ones that can influence a whole lot. I want to say hail up again to the Rastafarians. I want to say that that they have acknowledged, they have begun to acknowledge at least, because I know it was not always so, the significance and the relevance of women in what goes on. I feel that the women out there can influence their husbands, and the men can support their women, and they can all go out there and vote, because it will make a difference. They will be voting out of respect for their ancestors who fought to give them the right to vote. They will be voting out of respect for Courtney Crum Ewing, who was urging them to vote with his bullhorn and his message that got him blown away. They will be voting because they're respecting themselves and their spirituality. This is something which Africans have got to begin to tune into, their spirituality. And the mystic, and the natural mystic, it says right now that you must go out there and vote. You have to do it.
Okay, thank you, Joan. And for me, I think I agree with what everybody has said, and just to reinforce that voting is the biggest and the most sustaining mark of self-respect. It says, in summary, I am. It says my voice is important, and if you don't vote it, what you're saying is your voice is not important and you are unimportant. And I don't think in a society today we can afford that. So let us close here for this evening and thank Comica Johnson, Eve Blackman, Walter George, and Joan Cambridge, and myself. And thanks for joining and watching us this evening. And remember, this is the African Drums, and this is the television arm of the Cuffy 250 organization, an organization that is dedicated to raising the consciousness of Africans in the society through education and self-improvement. So until next time, from African Drums and Cuffy 250, thanks for watching.
This is Roll Call for this edition of African Drums. The African